They have to take the precautionary measures, which I don't need to repeat again here. That's the end of this particular part of our question time. Question number 1, Mr. Tommy Cheung. Thank you. The plastic shopping bag PSB charging requirement at the retail level was fully implemented on the 1st of April this year. Free distribution of plastic bags is banned at all points of retail sales of goods, and customers must pay a charge of no less than 50 cents for each plastic bag requested by them. Owing to food hygiene considerations, plastic bags used to carry foodstuff, which is without packaging, in non-airtight packaging or chilled or frozen state, are exempted from the charge. Also, plastic bags provided alongside services are exempted from the charge.
Some members of the public have relayed to me that since the government's publicity efforts are insufficient and the information it disseminated is confusing, both shop operators and customers generally do not understand the details of the PSB charging requirement, resulting in frequent disputes over PSB charging between them. In this connection, will the government inform this council? First, as a member of the public has related to me that he was charged a fee for a plastic bag provided to him by the shop operator, which was used for carrying both foodstuff in non-airtight packaging and items not provided alongside services, whether the charging of the fee was mandatory under the requirement. If so, whether the authorities have assessed if such a requirement will give rise to confusion, resulting in members of the public being overcharged and shop operators breaching the law inadvertently. Second, as I have learned, that operators of small and medium shops generally have little understanding of the PSB charging requirement, whether the authorities will consider adopting a lenient approach in handling non-compliance cases during the initial stage of the implementation of the requirements, if they will, of the general handling approach and procedures, if not the reasons. And third, whether the authorities will step up publicity on the PSB charging requirement, in particular by explaining to operators of small and medium restaurants as well as market traders of the scope of the requirements so as to allay their doubts, if they will, of the details, if not the reasons for that. Secretary for the Environment. President, the first phase of the environmental levy scheme on plastic shopping bags, which was launched in 2009, applied to some 3,500 chain or large outlets. In order to further address the problem of excessive use of plastic shopping bags, the PSB charging has been fully implemented from 1st April 2015 to cover all retailers in Hong Kong. Under the amended Product Eco-Responsibility Ordinance Cap 603, all retailers in Hong Kong, irrespective of the scale of operation and business nature, have to charge customers not less than 50 cents for each PSB provided in retail sales of goods, save for situations where there is exemption. The PSB charge is to be retained by the shops. Under ordinance, businesses which provide PSBs in offering services are not required to charge for PSBs. Furthermore, certain types of food, drink, or medicine for human or animal consumption, collectively as foodstuff, are entitled to the exemption for food hygiene reasons. Specifically, PSBs that contain only foodstuff in frozen, chilled state or in a non-airtight packaging are exempted from the PSB charge. My reply to Honorable Tommy Cheung's question is as follows. First, as I have explained above, foodstuff in non-airtight packaging are entitled to exemption, and retailers are not required to charge customers for providing PSBs to carry only such items. However, if the same PSB also contain items which are not entitled to exemption, the PSB should be charged in accordance with the ordinance. Nonetheless, for a takeaway meal where eating utensils and sauces provided by a restaurant are put in the same PSB, the exemption will still apply, as such utensils and sauces are ancillary items of the takeaway meal. The exemptions under the ordinance adequately cater for the daily needs of the general public and the common trade practices of the businesses and strikes a balance between food hygiene concerns and environmental protection. The exemptions have been vetted and approved by the LegCo before they were finalized for implementation. When members of the public shop at supermarkets and similar outlets, it is common that purchases would cover both items entitled to exemption and those not. At the same time, allowing retailers to provide free PSBs under such situations would likely undermine the effectiveness of the PSB charging measure. The PSB charging has been implemented for 2 months, whilst members of the public have gradually adapted to new requirements. I believe that the community at large adopts a reasonable approach in implementing the legislative requirements. Nonetheless, the simplest and most direct way is to bring your own bag while you shop. Apart from saving the charge, one would also help reduce the use of PSBs and protect our environment. Second, the scope of the PSB charging has been extended from 3,500 retail outlets under the first phase to over 100,000 retail points in a territory, and together with the new exemptions, it would be necessary for the general public and retailers to adapt to the new arrangement. Therefore, in the first month of the implementation of the PSB charging, we had adopted an educational and publicity-based approach by giving verbal warnings and on-site explanations of the legal requirements to retailers who were found to have contravened the requirements. Since May the 1st, the Environmental Protection Department no longer give prior warnings but would take immediate enforcement action against any contravention by issuing $2,000 fixed penalty notice or initiating prosecution proceedings. Third, in supporting the retail trade to prepare for the implementation of the PSB charging, we had kick-started extensive publicity and public education activities to raise awareness of the retail trades since mid-2014. Some 60 briefings were held covering 70 trade associations of various retail and catering sectors to provide information and explanation on the legislative requirements of the scheme. In response to Mr. Cheung's earlier suggestion, we conducted an additional briefing for the catering trade on the 20th of April. We also collaborated with district councils and held briefings at each of the 18 districts to disseminate the key messages to local small retailers during the fourth quarter of 2014. In addition, between January and March 2015, before implementation of new measures, we arranged visits to retail outlets in all the districts to distribute publicity materials and to promulgate the legislative requirements. A total of around 32,000 retail outlets were covered in the visits, including some 3,600 restaurants and 9,000 market stores. During initial implementation between March and end of May 2015, EPD had also arranged trained personnel to station at major retail outlets throughout the territory, like major shopping malls, department stores, supermarkets, to help explain the requirements to customers and provide support to retailers. Mr. President, the key objective for full implementation of the charging is to provide economic incentive to reduce the indiscriminate use of bags by retailers and general public, and to deepen the bring your own bag culture among the community, which in turn would contribute to effective waste reduction at source. Through continuous publicity and public education coupled with enforcement actions, the general public and the trade have gradually adapted to new measures in the first 2 months. With participation of the public and the concerted support of the trade, I believe it will be implemented successfully, and BYOB will become part of Hong Kong's use less, waste less culture. Mr. Tommy Cheung. For the first part of his answer, 2 months ago, I raised a question with him, like a restaurant might sell a lunchbox, and then a packet of chili might have been put into the plastic bag. It was found that the levy should be paid, and then later on the secretary said that this shouldn't be the case, and so it was exempted. I didn't take part in the scrutiny of the bill, and not because of that, so I'm saying that it wasn't well drafted. I just have to point out that the details are where you found the devil. Now, for this bill, or rather for this ordinance, I want to know whether the secretary would try to review improving the amended ordinance. Now, you still see a lot of disputes in the wet markets because customers just don't understand why a levy should be charged. Secretary, for this new arrangement, it has been implemented for over 2 months. According to context with the customers and according to departmental information, there has been a growing amount of knowledge. In the beginning, there were verbal warnings. Now, with dispense with that, and there will be immediate or direct law enforcement. In most cases, we found that the contravention was conducted in full knowledge of the requirements. Sometimes they might try their luck, and then even though they were buying a pair of slippers, a bag was still provided. So it wasn't that they didn't know. It's a matter of they knew it, but then they tried their luck. This is not acceptable. But of course, if there are areas in which we need to enhance the communication, and if some small traders are still not too sure about the requirements, I can promise to provide more information and provide better communication. Mr. Cheung. Well, as I have said, there has been 2 months since the implementation. I want to know whether he will review the law. Secretary, will there be a review? Mr. President, of course, we are just having a month or two's experience in relation to the implementation. We'll monitor the case closely. In due course, we will review the effectiveness. I think it's too early to talk about a review at such an early stage. Mr. Gary Chen. For the first phase of the levy scheme on plastic shopping bags, I think it was a matter of remitting the levy to the government. And then $35 million were involved. And in this final stage, in the second stage, remittance is not required. I think the government has promised that the chain stores should spend the levy collected on a green cause or have it donated to the green groups. I want to know about the progress of whether this has been done. Secretary, I'd like to thank Mr. Chen for his question. When we drafted the bill, and our position remains the same. Since we have to cater for the needs of enterprises of different scales, the levy is being retained by the shop operators. We do encourage the operators to spend the money on environmental protection programs. I think you are aware of appeals by green groups to the enterprises to spend the money on environmental protection. I think the feedback has been good, and more than a dozen large corporations have supported the cause of the green groups, that is, make good use of the levies collected and spend it for the sake of environmental protection. I'm sure the businesses have their own factors to take into account when they embark on such activities. We'll keep it in view, and we believe that the broad direction has received support from the community. Dr. Elizabeth Kwok. Thank you, Mr. President. Since the implementation of the PSB charging scheme, we have received complaints saying that there has been cases of excessive charging. So I hope that there will be better publicity. Now my question is, when will the government make an announcement about the number of plastic bags that has been reduced since the implementation of the scheme? And what about the fear that perhaps we're using more paper bags? And what about the environmental impacts of using plastic bags and paper bags? Secretary, I'd like to thank Dr. Kwok for her question. As in the past, in due course, we are going to carry out an evaluation to see whether the charging scheme has been effective in cutting down the waste. First of all, at the landfill sites, we are going to take a look. We'll try to look at the volume of plastic bags discarded there to see whether there has been a change. Secondly, we will follow up with the relevant chambers of commerce or trade associations. During the last phase, we were given the data. For this phase, yes, of course, it is not mandatory, but we've been told that they are willing to do so voluntarily. So they're going to report to us about the number of plastic bags provided. And thirdly, we are going to carry out a study. We'll try to find out in a scientific way as to the relationship between the use of plastic bags and the charging scheme. So we're taking a three-pronged approach, but it takes time because we have to gather sufficient experience before we can evaluate the effectiveness of the scheme. For paper shopping bags, we are also keeping it in view. Generally speaking, the switch from plastic shopping bags to paper shopping bags, I think it is still at a small scale because it carries a cost as well. But still, whether we are talking about paper bags or plastic bags, there will be an environmental impact. Our main message is bring your own bag. I hope that this will become a habit so that shoppers will cut down on the use of disposable bags when they shop. Mr. Ma Kwok. Thank you, Mr. President. We had experience from phase 1 of the plastic shopping bag charging scheme. Yes, we were using less plastic bags, but then more people were using paper bags and the non-woven bags. In fact, more shops are providing non-woven bags, and this is adding to the burden of the landfills. Now, for phase 2 of the scheme, I want to know whether we have observed a similar trend. If so, what is your countermeasure? My understanding is that some plastic bags are biodegradable. So in terms of the nature of such biodegradable plastic bags, are they similar to paper bags and non-woven bags? Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Ma, for your questions. There are 2 questions here. First of all, in 2009, we launched the first phase of the environmental levy scheme on plastic shopping bags. And then you see that 6 years have already passed, and I think there is now a mainstream thought that is for the non-woven bags. I'm sure everybody has got a lot of them at home, and therefore we become more alert about the production and the use of such non-woven bags. And in fact, starting from this year, we have already seen some activities. Instead of manufacturing more non-woven bags, there has been a scheme to encourage the shoppers to recycle the non-woven bags or even donate them for reuse. So I think the feedback has been positive, but of course we'll still be keeping it in view. Another point is about biodegradable plastic bags. Now, in overseas countries, probably they have been making greater use of composting to deal with their waste. But in Hong Kong, we're still mainly relying on landfilling to deal with municipal solid waste. So for plastic bags, irrespective of the nature, in the case of an enclosed environment, whether it is biodegradable or not, the difference is not significant. So in Hong Kong, the difference is small, quite unlike the overseas experience. Dr. Kenneth Chen, I understand that we have got exemptions under the scheme and has brought about confusion. May I refer to one particular point? For many chain cafes, when they sell cold drinks, they will automatically use a tailor-made plastic bag to keep the iced drinks. I don't think this is what we have expected and what we want to see happening all the time. Now, even though it is exempted, are you going to write to such chain fast food shops so that they will not automatically give away such plastic bags, because the cold drinks may have been consumed within a few minutes and then the plastic bags thus provided will be a waste? Would you like to urge them to take the initiative to ask whether customers would like to have it kept in a bag? Otherwise, we're just increasing the waste at our landfills. Secretary, I'd like to thank Dr. Chen for his question. I understand what he says. Basically, I agree with him. But then there are more cases, more examples than that. Say, for example, when you buy bread at a bakery, it is exempted, and so there has been excessive use of plastic bags, in particular prior to the introduction of the amendment. Now, with the introduction of the second phase, I think both the shop operators and the customers have become more aware, and there has been a decreased use of plastic bags. Some shopkeepers have even taken the initiative to ask customers if they want a bag. So I think in a broader sense, I think we can still enhance the awareness despite the exemptions so as to reduce the excessive use of plastic bags. Mr. Wong Kwok-hung. Thank you, Mr. President. Since April this year, the approach has been switched to retention from remittance in relation to the levies collected. Will the government consider finding out from the businesses as to the amount of levies collected and whether you can make sure that the money collected will be spent on environmental protection? Are you going to report to the LegCo regularly so as to tell us that you can trace the whereabouts of the levies collected so that they can be spent legitimately on the environmental protection? Secretary. Well, the spirit of the law is such that since we have to take care of the needs of enterprises of different scales, therefore the levies collected are being retained by the businesses. But then for the larger stores, we hope that they will make good use of the levies collected and sort of spend it for the public good or spend it on environmental protection. So we encourage such a practice and we have been promoting it. We have had good liaison with the relevant retail associations, and we try to work through such a channel so as to promote the idea that is make good use of the levies collected. For Mr. Wong's idea, well, in fact, we have been collecting the data, but then as to the extent of such a work or such a kind of work, of course, it is merely administrative, and it is sort of persuasive. And so in due course, we'll give you a report. We'll spend 23 minutes on this question. So second question.
Question number 2, Mr. Tang Ka-piu. Chairman, President, thank you. Between January 2009 and March this year, the average net tariffs of the Hong Kong Electric and the CLP Power increased respectively by 15 cents per kilowatt hour from 119.9 cents to 134.9 cents at a rate of 12.5%, and by 25 cents to from 89.2 cents to 114.2 cents, or 28%. On the other hand, the Consumer Price Index A rose from 109.5 in December 2009 to 128.6 in February this year, or 17.4%. Some have related to me that the aforesaid increase for average net tariffs were close to or higher than the CPI-A in the same period, which have imposed a financial burden on them. Will government inform this council? 1.
whether it knows between January 2009 and March this year, the average monthly tariff expenditures of residential users of the two power companies, the average tariffs per kWh, and the increase rate in the period broken down by consumption block based on by monthly consumption below 500, 500 to 1,000, 1,000 to 1,500, 1,500 to 2,000 and 2,000 and above. In the same period, the average monthly tariff expenditure of commercial users, the tariffs per kWh, the increase rate in the period broken down by consumption block based on by monthly basis, i.e. below 2,000, 2,000 to 5,000, 5,000 to 10,000, 10,000 to 20,000 and 20,000 or above. 2. As the tariffs of residential users are computed on a progressive basis, while those of commercial users are on a regressive basis, whether the authorities have assessed if such computation methods will encourage commercial users to consume huge amounts of electricity and result in residential users subsidizing commercial users, whether the authorities will consider providing the electricity subsidy again to residential users to alleviate the financial burden. And 3, as it is learned that the power companies may purchase gas-fired generation units in the coming years to cope with the new fuel mix and emissions standards, and generation units are part of their assets, whether the authorities have assessed if the tariffs will rise as a result, whether the authorities have studied the impacts on basic tariffs of lowering the per meter returns from the current 9.9% to 6%, if so, of the details. SCN President, as the CLP Power calculates electricity charges for its residential customers based on their bi-monthly consumption, we provide the tariff information on a bi-monthly basis. Please refer to Annex 1. 2. According to our understanding, there is no cross-subsidization of electricity charges among the residential customers, SCM customers, and non-residential customers with high consumption. The tariff structures of the two power companies are their business decision. They would make reference to factors like the cost of electricity supply, international tariff structures, environmental consideration, etc., and avoid cross-subsidization among different groups of customers. Facing competitive business environment, SME customers are expected to adopt all possible energy-saving measures to reduce their electricity expenditure. Using more electricity will only increase their operating costs. Thus, the current tariff structure will not encourage them to use huge amounts of electricity. For commercial and industrial customers with high consumption, the tariff structure primarily reflects the cost effectiveness of electricity supply. These customers may obtain electricity directly from the high voltage power system, which could reduce the extra cost of transforming high voltage power to low voltage power. Moreover, these high consumption consumers usually draw high volume of electricity at centralized location, which require less network facilities. Hence, it is more economically effective and will lower the cost of electricity supply to these customers. Besides the energy charge based on consumption, the two power companies also charge their commercial and industrial customers with high consumption a demand charge based on the maximum power demand, i.e. the higher the demand, the higher the demand charge would be. Hence, there is also no incentive for these customers to consume huge amounts of electricity. In any case, customers have to pay higher electricity charges for each extra unit of electricity consumed. The more they consume, the higher charge they will have to pay. Regarding the electricity charge subsidy, it was a one-off relief measure instead of a standing arrangement. The government will consider the economic and financial situation each year, and at present there is no plan to provide the electricity charge subsidy. 3. It is mentioned in the public consultation on the future development of the electricity market that the percentage of gas generation will be increased to around 50% of the total fuel mix in 2020. In order to increase the use of natural gas, we envisage that the power companies will need to build a small number of additional gas-fired generation units. With the expiry of the cheaper gas supply contracts, it is expected that the future tariff will cost more than the present level. The adjustment on tariff would depend on a host of factors, including the international oil price, fuel costs, the retirement schedule of generation units, capital investment, and the cost of new infrastructure. Moreover, tariff in a particular year will also be affected by other factors like operating costs, sales volumes, and movements in the tariff stabilization fund and the fuel cost recovery account. Thus, we are unable to estimate the tariff implications for a particular year regarding the proposals of new gas generation units or lowering the permitted rate of return. Mr. Tang Ka-piu, with the reply did not quite address question number 1, but from the table, it shows that the situation that we take for granted is exposed. Some said that the HEC tariff is higher than that of CLP. According to Annex 1, for residential customers, 500 unit, 98.9 cents for HEC, but it is 112 cents for China Light and Power. Now, this is it is not the case that CLP is cheaper than HKE. In 2015, the rate of increase was 3.1%, but for residential, 3.4%, or 2.8% for commercial. We are particularly concerned about the subdivided units. They share the same meters. They're not luxury flats, and they consume anything up to 2,000 units of electricity, and they're paying $1.3. With such high tariff, I'd like to put this to the Secretary. Now, for the subdivided units that share the common meters and they have to pay higher tariff than even the commercial users, how are you going to help them? Secretary, thank you very much for the question. I'd like to clarify one point. The Honourable Member talked about Annex 1, the table there. In 2015, he said that some saw the increase of 3 point something percent, but non-residential 2 point something percent. Now, there is no cross subsidization at all. Commercial premises, the increase was 2 point something percent, but for residential, for the low consumption users, they won't experience any tariff increase for a couple of years. So some would have a higher rate of increase, some lower. But be that as it may, there is no question of any cross-subsidization at all. That's very clear. The Honourable Member talked about the subdivided flats, and this is of concern to the community. We will try various means to address the issue. The two power companies will help those living in the subdivided units to install individual meters. They will identify the owners and secure the agreement for the subdivided units to install individual meters for free. The CLP Power will also waive the deposit in this regard. And they are prepared to waive the deposit in this area. And Hong Kong Electric is also considering offering assistance to those SDU dwellers. And we hope that the dwellers will be assisted in that way. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, President, thank you. In his reply, Para 2, the Secretary said that SME and the high consumption users, the tariff reflects the cost effectiveness. Now, for CLP Power, the generation units would have everything to do with the peak of utilization. Now, during the peak of utilization, will there be any surcharge imposed on the high consumption users so that they would be encouraged to use more energy-saving facilities? Secretary. President, thank you very much, Mr. Wu, for the question. For CLP power, I understand that there are some measures to reduce the overall peak period consumption, in particular the high consumption users. They can adjust the timing, and there will be incentives, for instance, for the high consumption users to use more power at night, and there is a price tariff structure to achieve that. So whether it should be done by raising or decreasing the tariffs, I'm sure that power companies can work things out with the consumption, with the users. But definitely we'll try to reduce the peak period consumption. Now we have the consultation on the electricity market, and I'm sure that there would be input regarding the optimal use of electricity. Mr. Wu, now for the high consumption users, there is a regressive mechanism during the peak period. They are competing with the residential users. My question is, will the administration be asking the two power companies to increase the surcharge or impose a surcharge on the high consumption users during the peak period? Secretary. President, the tariff structure of the two power companies represents a business commercial decision. We have to appreciate that. There are different organizations that use power in different ways. The highest consumption users, like hospitals, the MTRC, the universities, they need the consumption for their operation. If we were to raise the daytime consumption tariff substantially, it may not be in line with the community needs. So we have to look at that commercial decision. We are conducting a public consultation. If members have any positive comments, we are only too delighted to hear them. Dr. Elizabeth Kwok. President, the Secretary has been reminding people that the tariff in future is going to go up. In this consultation exercise, the permitted return is likely to be reduced from 9 to a lower percentage. Will this be done in order to lighten the burden? Other than this, will something else be done? Some said that some intelligent meters would be effective in reducing consumption. Will this be supported by the administration? If so, will this be helping reduce the tariff? Secretary, thanks very much, Dr. Kwok, for the question. We would like to introduce various means to do something for the green cause, as well as to achieve a reasonable tariff. And we also would like to reduce our carbon emission. And this is something that the community will have to be committed to. We appreciate that the members of the public are very concerned about the rising or the rise in tariffs. In terms of the permitted return, there is a room for downward adjustment. If there is a bigger downward adjustment, definitely it would lower the tariff. The lower the permitted return, the more likely that the tariff will be lower. But the tariff would be subject to different factors. Dr. Kwok talked about some intelligent meters or some technology that would enable people to understand that the consumption pattern that would be environmentally friendly, it would help them save the tariff. This is mentioned in the public consultation document. We asked 5 questions. One of them is how people see the demand side management, how we can reduce energy and reduce emission. These kind of intelligent meters can certainly be followed up for us to harness the sophisticated technology. This is a new thinking, how we can take advantage of technology to achieve savings in tariff and consumption. Dr. Kwok, I'm none the wiser. If the permitted return is lower, then the tariff will be lower. But he hasn't explained to us why the permitted return is proposed to be 6 to 8% and not lower. Secretary, I said on different occasions that when we put together the consultation document, we did have some consultants to give us the input. Earlier, the consultant looked at the situation in other jurisdictions with similar environment. And when the power companies make investment in their grid, what is the optimal rate of return should be? According to the consultant, 6 to 8% is a reasonable level having regard to the international standard. But we must say that this level will be subject to change as time goes on. We're going to ask the consultant in a year's time or so to update the situation, having regard to the international situation, to determine what the actual optimal level should be. And this is on the basis of an objective study conducted by a consultant. Mr. Hon Kwok-hung, President. Some members of the public are very concerned about CLP power, which before the end of the consultation period started the advanced work of the new generation units. They are doubting whether the CLP power is trying to increase the size of the assets in order to pave the way to justify a tariff hike. Has the Secretary been aware of the situation? Will he follow up on this? Will he be prepared to hold what the CLP power is doing or criticize them for doing so? Secretary, thanks very much, President. A couple of points there. First of all, last year in the consultation document, we have to improve the air quality, the carbon fired generation units that will be replaced. And it is understandable that they're replacing the generation units. Members are concerned whether the volume is too large, in the sense that there will be more or too many generation units in order to boost the size of the assets. Now, this is something that the administration is monitoring closely. We did reject some of the development proposals. Of concern to members of the public would be the reserve power supply. We anticipate that the reserve supply would be reduced. So we would try various means to keep an eye on the situation to make sure that the volumes of the generation units will be appropriate. Members must be aware that for these new generation units, it would take a bit of time to plan, and we understand that the two power companies are making preparation for that, and this is going to be standing Hong Kong in good stead. When they present these proposals to the ENB for approval, we will make sure that the volumes of the generation units can meet the needs of Hong Kong, but not being excessive. Dr. Fernando Cheung, President, the rate of return cannot guard against or cannot save look after the interests of the general public, and this is regrettable. There are some subdivided unit dwellers are charged electricity tariff that are higher than what they use. They normally consume 100 or 200 kWh in electricity, but they would be charged something like $1.03, $1.04. In fact, what they have to pay for should be 90 cents. So I'd like to put this to the Secretary. Under the law, there is no specific requirement or regulation over this excessive charging of tariff. Will there be any legislative amendment to make sure that these unscrupulous owners will be exploiting the underprivileged SDU dwellers and charge them tariff which is higher than what they consume? Secretary, thanks very much for the question. The SDUs are not something that I understand the most, but my view is that this is a complicated issue, not just the tariff issue. In my response to the previous speaker, we very much hope that we will be able to offer some assistance to the subdivided unit dwellers to make sure that their expenditure would be more reasonable. We are communicating with the power companies. They are more than willing to work with various organizations to identify a scheme whereby the SDU dwellers will be individually metered, and CLP Power will be prepared to waive the deposit of opening an account. The installation will be for free. The deposits will be waived, and that would show clearly that their consumption. Hong Kong Electric is likewise positive about the idea, so we will be stepping up our communication with the power companies in order to offer the best assistance to these dwellers. We've spent 23.5 seconds on this.
We'll now move on to question number 3, Mr. Leung Kwok-hung. President, can I through you ask who the person sitting next to Mr. Yao is? Now, Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, Mr. Yao is here in his capacity as Secretary for Transport and Housing. So, in fact, he is the substitute for Mr. Anthony Cheung. Please ask your question. I hope that we can spend 15 minutes and then we can, in the meanwhile, ask Dr. Anthony Cheung to come back. There isn't a quorum. Now, Mr. Ko-wing Man is here. Mr. Wong Kam-sing is here. Who is that? I think there isn't a quorum here. Before I ask the clerk to ring the bell to ask members to come back to the chamber, I want to remind you that it's up to the administration to decide who to send to LegCo sittings to answer members' questions. And that's why I am criticizing the administration. Leung Kwok-hung, please ask question number 3. President, first of all, through you, I would like to ask the Undersecretary this question. Why is it that there is no written reply? Or rather, can I ask the Secretary why he hasn't given this Council a written reply? I think this relates to, or this affects our dignity. There is a written reply. I haven't received it. President, I haven't received a written reply. I don't have a written reply here. I don't have it here. No, I don't have it. It's as simple as that, President. All members should have received the written reply. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, please carefully check what papers and documents you have received. President, I don't have it. President, I'm serious. Because sometimes they give us written replies, sometimes they don't. Now, if I think you should make sure that they must give us written replies. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, the administration has the responsibility to, before the sitting starts, provide written replies to members, and if they can't do so, they have to give us an explanation. But I haven't received the reply. Please ask the question. But then Mr. Leung Sing was saying that I was so muddle-headed. Please do not waste time, Mr. Leung. Please read other question. Is it my fault? President, is it my fault when someone is speaking from his seat when I'm about to start? Is that my fault? There's no use losing your temper over me. President, I think you have to control the behavior of the other members. Now, I want to say that if you do not start reading the question, then I will rule that you have violated the rules of procedure, and I will ask you to leave the conference room immediately. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, read out the question. I understand you have all the powers, but you are unfair, President. In February this year, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority lowered the maximum loan-to-value ratio for self-use residential property with value below 7 million to 60% across the board. Members of the public have told me that after the introduction of the measure, the price of low-price residential flats has risen rather than dropped, and the rent of residential units has also been pushed up, and members of the public have encountered enormous hardship. And then members of the public have also said that the government should relaunch the tenant purchase scheme, TPS. So in this connection, will government inform this council whether the government is going to go along the wishes of the public by considering relaunching the TPS, which on the one hand allows existing tenants of PRH flats to purchase PRH flats at low price, and then on the other reduces the fiscal deficit of the HA. If so, when it's going to relaunch the TPS, if not, of the reasons for that. B, the government said in reply to my question on the 3rd of December last year that it would not be appropriate to implement rent control measures. Whether the government has any new measures to effectively help members of the public, especially those living on CSSA and those renting cubicles and bed space apartments in the short term to rent private residential flats at reasonable rent. If so, of the implementation date and details, if not, the reasons for that, and whether the government is turning a blind eye to the problem that members of the public cannot afford high rentals. And C, as the government pointed out in the reply mentioned just now, that there was a serious demand-supply imbalance in Hong Kong's housing market, whether the government will immediately introduce measures to further restrict non-local residents in purchasing residential property in Hong Kong and comprehensively implement the Hong Kong Property for Hong Kong People policy to honor the pledge of assisting middle-income families to buy their own homes made by the CE in his election manifesto, if so, of the timetable and details, if not the reasons for that, and whether government has no intention at all to honor the CE's pledge, and whether government has chosen to ignore the home purchase aspiration of members of the public. Secretary, Mr. Deputy, the crux of the rise in flat prices and rentals in the past few years lies in the supply-demand imbalance in housing and the inadequate supply of land. The current government is determined to solve the problem at source by adopting a supply-led strategy, setting a 10-year housing supply target and continuously increasing supply of land and housing with a view to gradually averting the supply-demand imbalance. At the same time, 2 rounds of demand-side management measures were introduced in October 2012 and February 2013 respectively to curb external and speculative demands to prevent the market from being overheated. The government notes that the property market in Hong Kong turned exuberant again in the second half of 2014 with an increasing risk of a bubble. In view of this, the HKMA announced a new round of supervisory measures on property mortgage in late February 2015 to strengthen the bank's risk management and resilience and to enhance borrowers' ability to cope with the impact in the event of a property market downturn. These measures aim to safeguard the stability of the banking and financial system. My replies to the 3-part question raised by Mr. Leung are as follows. A. During the public consultation on the LTHS, there were suggestions to relaunch the TPS. However, in the light of the management problems arising from the coexistence of individual owners and tenants of the HKMA in TPS estates, HA decided that apart from the existing 39 TPS estates, new TPS estates will not be launched. Nevertheless, there are still suggestions that subsidized sale flats with prices lower than those of HOS flats be provided to PRH tenants to facilitate them to achieve home ownership. To this end, in his policy address this year, the CE proposed to the HA that suitable flats be identified among its PRH developments under construction for sale to eligible green form applicants, mainly PRH tenants, in the form of a pilot scheme with prices set at levels lower than those of HOS. This is a response to the LTHS general direction of expanding the forms of subsidized home ownership, and this scheme is generally referred to as the Green Form Subsidized Home Ownership Scheme, or GSH. HA has decided on the implementation details of GSH, including the eligibility criteria, price setting mechanism, resale arrangements, and so on and so forth. Housing Department will follow up accordingly. B. Government appreciates the impact of high rental level on the public, especially the impact on the grassroots, and knows that there are views in society suggesting that government should regulate the level of private residential rent and the rate of increase. But both local and overseas empirical studies suggest that tenancy control measures can lead to unintended consequences, including reducing supply of rented accommodation, higher asking rents, and encouraging certain behavior from landlords to offset the impact of the tenancy control measures, limiting access to adequate housing by the socially disadvantaged, and discouraging proper maintenance of rented accommodation by landlords. The government considers that introducing tenancy control measures in the midst of a severely tight housing supply may bring even more disadvantages to tenants before the benefits could be realized. This is not in the interest of tenants at large, nor those inadequately housed households and the general public. The fundamental solution to address the supply-demand imbalance and to curb rental increase lies with a continued increase in housing supply. To meet the housing needs of the grassroots, the government will spare no efforts in identifying land to build more PRH units and to ensure the rational use of PRH resources. At the same time, government will work with relevant organizations such as the EAA to enhance public education efforts, advertise tenants' rights, and promote good tenancy practices. At present, the CSSA has provided a safety net for those who are unable to support themselves financially to meet their basic needs. Moreover, the CCF has rolled out various assistance schemes to provide residents in need with further economic support. For those having imminent housing needs, they may consider applying for compassionate rehousing through the recommendation of the SWD. They may also apply under the Express Flat Allocation Scheme for earlier allocation of PRH flats. C. According to the Development Bureau, the policy objective of the Hong Kong Property for Hong Kong People measure is to accord priority to Hong Kong permanent residents in making use of our scarce housing land resources when there is a tight supply-demand situation in the property market. Government announced in September 2012 that the measure be applied to 2 residential sites in the Kai Tak development area. The 2 sites were sold through tender in mid-2013. Subsequently, the various demand-side management measures targeting the property market implemented by the government have effectively curbed the demand of non-local purchases. Stamp duty statistics from the IRD indicate that purchases of residential property by non-local individuals and non-local companies during the first quarter of 2015 stood at a monthly average of 93 cases, or 1.5% of the total number of transactions, markedly below the monthly average of 365 cases, or 4.5% of the total number of transactions during the period from January to October 2012 before the introduction of the BSD. And hence the government is of the view that there is no pressing need to extend the measure to other sites at this stage. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. According to Part C of the reply, the Hong Kong Property for Hong Kong People measure no longer exists. So this is an empty promise made by C.Y. Leung. And in fact, I have asked the government to implement rent control. There are 2 parts. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, you are only allowed to ask one simple supplementary question. I'm asking the question, but I think you are giving us a very long preamble. All right. Concerning rent control, the rental part and also the duration of the tenancy agreement. I want to know whether you have a timetable and a roadmap for introducing flexibility into these 2 areas, or is it that you're not going to implement rent control at all? Secretary, rent control is a very controversial issue. There is no consensus yet in society. In fact, we have carried out a study on the effects of rent control implemented in Hong Kong in the past. We've also made reference to overseas experience. We gave a report to the Housing Panel in July last year. Local and overseas empirical studies show that tenancy control measures can lead to unintended consequences. I've already introduced the consequences in my written reply. So in the light of the fact that the measure may be counterproductive, and that there is no consensus in society, and that there may be a lot of disadvantages before the benefits can be realized, we are of the view that introducing rent control will not be in line with the interests of the tenants and members of the public at large. Mr. Chen Kam-lam. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. In his reply, the Secretary says that there is a shortage of land for housing development, and there is also a demand-supply imbalance in the property market. So the 3 parts in the reply relate to TPS, rent control, and Hong Kong Property for Hong Kong People. Apart from these 3 measures, are there other measures that can resolve the problem of shortage of housing supply? And then concerning the so-called well-off tenant policy, I think there are lots of shortcomings. Some tenants are paying double rent or triple rent, but these rent levels are unable to achieve a deterrent effect. There are people who earn a lot of income, like Mr. Leung Kwok-hung. He earns $80,000 to $90,000 a month, and yet he is still occupying a PRH flat. This is most unfair. How can you address this problem? Secretary, concerning public housing resources, we understand that there are cases of abuse of such resources, and HA and the HD are adopting measures to curb the abuse of PRH resources. We'll step up inspection as well as enforcement. And then concerning the well-off tenants policy, there has been a lot of discussion within the HA. For well-off tenants, we have a set of rules that apply to them. As to whether this policy should be changed, there is no consensus within the HA. This is a very controversial subject within the HA, and so as a decision has yet to be reached, the status quo will be maintained in the interim. Mr. Tony Chair. Mr. Deputy, concerning the housing problem, in the past 2 to 3 years, a number of measures and policies were implemented to increase supply. But then distant water can't quench an instant fire, Mr. Deputy. Many people think that the property prices at present are excessively high. So can the government carry out a study as to what a reasonable level of property prices is or means? Secretary, Mr. Deputy, as to whether property prices are at a high level, we have to look at the effects of property prices on the financial system and on the macroeconomic situation. In fact, earlier on, the financial secretary, in commenting on Hong Kong's economic development, also mentioned the property market. In fact, we have a tight supply with regard to short-term housing supply. And so the demand side management measures have to continue. We haven't set a certain property price level at which we need to do certain things or withdraw certain measures. We need to assess the impact of property prices on financial stability and on the macroeconomic situation before we decide what action needs to be taken. So we'll closely monitor the development in the property market and we'll implement suitable measures at a suitable time. Mr. Cheung Kwok-chu. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. In his main reply, the Secretary says that this is not the appropriate time to introduce rent control. But then there are some grassrooters who are paying rent at a level of $80 per square foot. And this rental level per square foot is higher than the unit rent for luxury flats. And these are grassroots families, 3 to 4P families, and they spend a lot of their income on rental. And the CSSA payment is not enough for these people to pay their rent and to make ends meet. So if this is not the right time to introduce tenancy control or rent control, when is the right time? Secretary, Mr. Deputy, our studies show that tenancy control measures can lead to unintended consequences. And these consequences may harm the people that we want to help. Tenancy control may lead to an increase in rental level and a decrease in supply. I understand that members are concerned about the pressure on the grassrooters. We can understand this concern. And so we need to increase the supply of PRH flats. That's the solution to solve the problem. And if certain households have great difficulties, they can apply for compassionate rehousing with the SWD, or they can also apply for express flat allocation. So these are measures that can help the households in difficulty. Mr. Cheung Kwok-chu, is it that your question has not been answered? He hasn't told me when the right time is to implement rent control. He may say we will have to wait for 5 years, 10 years, and so what's going to happen to the grassroots in the interim? Secretary, do you have anything to add? No. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung. Mr. Deputy, it's not at all easy to resolve the housing problem in Hong Kong. The government is adopting a multi-pronged approach. But then the situation has not improved despite the various measures implemented, and Hong Kong people are impatient. They are criticizing the government. But then people must realize that they have to wait for land to be made available for housing development, and we'll have to wait for at least 8 to 10 years. So the DAB knows that there may be difficulties in implementing tenancy control, but then what about a rent allowance? In fact, the CCF has provided rent assistance or rent allowances to households in great difficulty. As we all know, there are about 300,000 households queuing up for PRH flats, and a rent allowance or some rent assistance can help those on the waiting list. So these are all grassroots. How come the government cannot give them some rent assistance so as to alleviate their financial difficulties? So can the Secretary consider extending the rent assistance scheme to cover all those on the waiting list for PRH? Secretary, instead we have seriously considered such a suggestion, Mr. Deputy, but then we have a shortage of supply in the market, and we are worried that if we launch any form of rent assistance, then there may be unintended consequences. Landlords may increase the rent because they know that many households will be able to get rent assistance or rent allowances from the government, and as a result, the rent allowances will only become the extra rents to be paid to the landlords. And also, the offering of such an allowance may become a long-term commitment and burden on the part of the government, and grassroots may also suffer from higher rentals, and those who ultimately benefit from such a scheme will be the landlords and not the tenants. Mr. Wong Kwok-hung. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. The Secretary said very confidently that giving rent allowances to tenants will only benefit the landlords. I agree. We understand that landlords may immediately increase the rent, and as a result, the rent allowances will end up in the pockets of the landlords. And that's why we are of the view that rent control, or rather a rent allowance, has to be accompanied by rent control. The two have to go hand in hand. So if both measures are implemented, then the rent assistance or the rent allowances will not go into the pockets of the landlords. Does the administration agree that there is an urgent need to help households in great difficulty, for example, those living in subdivided flats? Secretary, in fact, Mr. Deputy, the government has considered Mr. Wong's suggestion to implement both measures, but still we think that the unintended consequences will arise. Landlords will have various ways and means to increase the rentals. And as a result, the tenants will ultimately suffer instead of benefit from such arrangements. And so because of these loopholes, we don't think there is, it is really desirable to implement these measures.
The fourth question, Ms. Yiu Si-wing. Thank you, Mr. President. It's been reported that this year the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department stepped up enforcement efforts against unlicensed hawkers, resulting in a night bazaar in Sam Shui Po, which had emerged during the Chinese New Year holidays and past few years no longer operating. On the other hand, the Financial Secretary has indicated in his budget speech this year that the government will consider introducing food trucks, which are popular abroad, to Hong Kong. Moreover, the Food and Health Bureau put forward some improvement proposals in March this year after reviewing the existing policy on hawker control and management. In this connection, will the government inform this Council? 1. Of the respective numbers of licensed hawkers and prosecutions instituted against unlicensed hawkers in each of the past 3 years, whether it has studied the causes for the year-on-year changes in such numbers. 2. Of the difference between the license the authorities intended to issue for food trucks and itinerant hawker license, whether the authorities will consider in issuing such license giving priority to the existing itinerant hawker license holders who intend to change their business to operate food trucks. And 3, in view of the changes in the number of licensed hawkers in the past few years and the problems caused by unlicensed hawkers, of the policies the authorities will put in place in future to tackle the problem of illegal hawking, whether it will adjust the existing policy on hawker control and management in light of the introduction of food trucks. The Secretary for Food and Environmental Hygiene, the Secretary for Food and Health. Mr. President, over the years, it's been the government's policy to regulate hawking activities of licensed hawkers and take enforcement action against illegal hawking. Under existing enforcement strategies where hawking is not taking place in major thoroughfares, areas of a high pedestrian flow, markets, hawker bazaars, officers of the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department will usually seek to disperse the hawkers by giving verbal warning. Prosecutions will be instituted if verbal warning is unheeded. For hawking that is taking place at any of the above locations, they will take prosecution action without giving any prior warning. The same will apply to hawking involving the sale of prohibited, restricted food or cooked food, which are strictly forbidden under all circumstances. The above is adopted to strike a reasonable balance among a number of considerations, including the needs to uphold the normal operation of licensed hawker stalls in the district, safeguard environmental hygiene, food safety, and the personal safety of pedestrians, and reduce the potential noise nuisance to the community, etc. My reply to the various parts of the question is as follows. 1. The number of hawker licenses in 2012, 13, 14 is 6,739, 6,434, and 6,347 respectively. In view of the various problems caused by on-street hawking, it has been the government's position that no new hawker licenses should normally be issued, while the succession and transfer of different categories of hawker licenses already issued are either subject to stringent restrictions and are not allowed at all, as in case of itinerant hawker license. In addition, the government has rolled out since mid-2013 an assistance scheme under which an ex gratia payment is offered to hawkers in fixed-pitch hawking areas who opt for voluntary surrender of their hawker licenses to the government. As a result, the number continued to drop. Frontline FEHD hawkers have been taking enforcement action in light of the actual situation on the ground in respect of licensed hawkers, illegal hawking, and obstruction to passageway, and in response to public complaints. The number of prosecutions taken out in the past 3 years against unlicensed hawkers is 27,457, 29,243, and 26,025 respectively. As for part 2 and 3 of the question, which are related to the food trucks, the following is the response from the CEDB and the FHB. Food truck is a new idea put forward by the FS in his 2015-16 budget speech. With a view to enriching the variety of culinary delicacies available to tourists and local people, CDB is, in collaboration with the FHB, FEHD, TD, and other relevant departments, studying various aspects as vehicle specifications, requirements, licensing requirements, mode of operation, food safety, and environmental hygiene. At this stage, the CDB is actively collecting and studying relevant information from overseas, such as those of North America, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Europe, and Australia. Details of implementation, including whether the current licensing requirements for food industry are applicable to food trucks, the eligibility of applicants, and the feasibility of mobile operation, will be subject to the outcome of the study. The trend in the past few years is that the number of both licensed hawkers and licensed hawkers has been declining. The details are as follows. We have listed in 2010, number of licensed hawkers 7,174 and unlicensed hawkers 1,876. In 2014, number of licensed hawkers 6,347 and licensed hawkers 1,440. As for unlicensed hawkers, FEHD will continue to conduct mobile patrols and raids to deter illegal hawking. The government is committed to ensuring food safety and maintaining a clean and hygienic living environment for the people of Hong Kong, in particular for those residing in the vicinity of areas designated for hawking. The FHB and FEHD are duty-bound, regardless of whether the prevailing hawker policy is targeted at regulating or supporting hawking activities. The FHB and FEHD stated our position clearly on 2nd of March 2015 when we discussed the local hawker policy with the Subcommittee on Hawker Policy under the panel on food safety and environmental hygiene under the Council. From policy perspective, the government seeks to formulate a hawker policy which strikes an optimal balance between allowing licensed hawking activity to strive and meeting other legitimate concerns such as avoiding unreasonable nuisance, local community, and in addition to ensuring food safety, environmental hygiene, and public safety. As for implementation, the government keeps an open mind towards concrete proposals on developing hawking in any locality, so long as food safety and environmental hygiene are not compromised, public passageways are not obstructed, and local community support is obtained. Although the detailed plan for bringing in food trucks is still subject to the outcome of the study, the mission of the FHB and FHB, i.e. ensuring food safety and maintaining a clean and hygienic living environment for the people of Hong Kong, should not be affected by the introduction of this new idea. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Yiu Si-wing. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. The FS has made a proposal on food trucks, and that has attracted the concern of the public and the tourism industry. In the main reply, it said that the administration is actively collecting and studying relevant information on an overseas experience. I want to know whether there is a timetable, and if there is, when? If there is none, why? Who is to answer the question? The Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. We are following the issue. We are collecting information from overseas. We hope that under the existing laws, without substantial change, the food trucks can be launched. At the present stage, I can only inform Mr. Yiu that we are working on this actively, and we hope that within as soon as possible, we will finalize the plan. Mr. Jeffrey Lam. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the FS for accepting the view of our party. When we introduced the concept of the food truck, he asked many questions. I want to ask the administration, will the administration designate places for night bazaars like the poor man's nightclub in the central in the past, or say allow the food trucks to park in parking spaces in the side streets to do business in the evening? That will help to boost our local economy, and that will also provide special features and job opportunities for all urban areas. And if there is such an arrangement, how will they provide water supply and power supply? Will you consider where such night bazaars are to be located, and how can you provide power and water and also deal with refuse? Secretary for F&H. Well, I will answer the questions first, and then the SCD will supplement. At a meeting on the 2nd March 2015, we met with the Hawker Policy Subcommittee under the panel on food safety and environmental hygiene. And we briefed the policy. We briefed the subcommittee on our policy, and there's a point related to the question. And we have 5 proposals and 8 principles. The last one is that with regard to the setting up of a local bazaar in the evening, we have an open mind without compromising food safety and environmental hygiene. We are willing to give our advice, and one important point is that we should get local community support. It should be a bottom-up approach. When we try to identify a place for a certain premises, say for example for a bazaar or a market, apart from hygiene, power and water supply arrangements, if we can get local support, we can coordinate the departments to provide such facilities. The main resistance comes from the locality. If the location is not suitable, people living nearby may think that the facility or the arrangement will cause traffic obstruction and also environmental nuisance. I think you have encountered that. After that meeting, I met with the chairman and vice chairman of the 18 district councils. I briefed them on the latest hawker policy, which has been amended currently. And the district councils may set up working groups or committees to discuss the matter, and they can identify locations in the relevant districts, and they can recommend suitable locations within their districts. There can be different types of markets or bazaars. It can be a daily bazaar, it can be a weekly bazaar, it can be in the evening, it can be in the morning. It's about they can make recommendations on the modus operandi, whether it should be for is a wet market or cooked food market or a dry goods market. If there is local support, we will take up the coordination, and we will work with the departments to solve the issues such as water supply, hygiene, refuse, power supply, so on and so forth. Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, Chairman. The DAB visited the U.S. last year. On informal occasions, we asked the administration to introduce food trucks, and we got positive supply from the administration. It was proposed by the FS budget speech. It has attracted public attention. So far, there has been no progress. It's most disappointing that the CEDB said that there was no licensing system for food trucks. The food factory licensing requirements would be applied. In the early stage of food trucks could not be operated in a mobile manner. Food trucks had to be operated at fixed spots. This is just a transition. How could people invest heavily for just a transitional arrangement? The food trucks cannot be mobile. I really don't hope that the proposal be aborted. The SCD, Mr. Deputy, we are now collecting the information, the licensing system overseas. You have to understand that Hong Kong has its own circumstances. We are densely populated. Our roads are heavily utilized. We need to consider the matter comprehensively before we can decide on the localities. Ms. Chan Yuen-han. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. The policy is confusing. The root of the problem is that the administration does not face the two dimensions in our economy. One is the 6 pillar industries, and the other is local economy. There should be room for development for creative industries and local economics. Mr. Leung has pointed out the facts. When I asked the FS where should the Ms. Chan, I have to provide the background. Now they pull different departments together to answer Mr. Yu's question, but he is not able to address the question. The question is very clear. Why in Shing-mu during the Lunar New Year there was no night bazaar? They were hand carts and selling food. They exist. They are hawkers. The government wants to drive them away. You just neither here nor there. Ms. Chan Yuen-han. Ms. Chan Yuen-han. This is a question and answer session. It's not a time for giving speeches. Please ask your question. Yes, I'm about to ask my question. I really want to praise him. I agree with him. You have an open mind in your hawker policy. The question is the FS should coordinate two sides and promote plurality in the economy. Now there are mobile food hawkers in Guilin Street. Will you, on this basis, issue food truck licenses to those trolleys which sell food? Mr. Deputy, if I have understood Ms. Chan's question correctly, in respect of the situation in Guilin Street, it is different from the food trucks. In Guilin Street, the year before last, before the Lunar New Year, there was the so-called Guilin Night Bazaar. But according to my understanding, they were mainly run by illegal hawkers. And the cooked food would affect public hygiene, food hygiene, and also caused nuisance to the residents nearby. Even the Shing-mu District Council had a strong view against similar forms of activities. There were hawkers gathering at locations of their own choice, and then they operated a market. After the discussion between the panel and the district councils, we have a consensus. If there is a bazaar or market, food safety, environmental hygiene, public safety are the main issues, and we also need to consider whether excessive nuisance has been caused to the residents nearby. And the best approach is a bottom-up approach. It should first start at the local level. People work together to find a suitable location. And when there is a suitable location, there can be a proposed MO, modus operandi, and after that, and the residents are of the view that such a mode of operation will not cause adverse impacts, then the government will step in and help in respect of water and power supply, dealing with environmental hygiene, and dealing with refuse, and if there is a need for licensing, we will consider a suitable license. Ms. Chan Yuen-han, my question has not been answered. My question is very simple. Will you provide itinerary hawking license to deal with that? Do you have any supplement, Mr. Dr. Ko? Concerning the example raised by Madam Chan, that was in respect of unlicensed cooked food hawkers. We have to prohibit that. As for food trucks, we'll consider with the SED whether there is a suitable license for the food trucks. At the present stage, there is no such a category of license within the FEHD. There is no suitable license to cater for for food trucks. If we don't need to change the law, if we want to do it as soon as possible, then one possible way is to use the food factory license to deal with this for the time being. Finally, we will have to consider another category of license. This involves changing the law.
Question number 5, Mr. Kwok Wai-keung. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. With the advancements in information technology and the prevalence of the Internet, viewing online TV programs or listening to online radio programs through computers and smartphones is increasingly popular among the public. Some members of the public have relayed to me that as online television and radio programs can reach out to different sectors of society, the views of the public, and in particular the younger generation, about social affairs may be influenced by online programs. They consider that instances of the hosts of online programs using indecent expressions or spreading objectionable ideas are quite common. In this connection, will the government inform this council 1. As online programs are not currently subject to regulation under the Broadcasting Ordinance and other relevant legislation, whether the authorities will consider establishing a framework, such as by enacting legislation or introducing a licensing regime, to regulate the operation of online TV and radio stations, as well as the content of online programs, including the expression used by hosts, as well as conducting studies and extensive consultation in this respect, if they will, of the details, if not the reasons for that. And 2, how the authorities handle public complaints against online programs at present, whether they handled and followed up relevant complaints in the past 5 years, if they did, of the ways in which they handled the complaints. Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development. Mr. Deputy, the aim of the Broadcasting Ordinance, BO Cap 562, is to regulate TV program services. Online TV stations deliver their TV programs through the Internet, which is one of the many forms of online dissemination of information. Since Internet service is exempted from regulation under the BO, it follows that it is not subject to the regulation of the Generic Code of Practice on TV Program Standards issued by the Communications Authority, CA. On the other hand, as programs of online radio stations are not sound broadcasting services transmitted via radio wave, they are not governed by the Telecommunications Ordinance, TO, and hence not subject to the regulation of the Radio Code of Practice on Program Standards issued by the CA. Broadcasting services under the regulation of the BO and TO are mainly provided through designated frequency of radio waves and exclusive fixed networks. The above two media, capable of transmitting broadcasting signals for extensive reception by more than 1 million of audience or listeners across the territory at the same time in a direct and stable manner regardless of the volume of internet traffic, are the most effective and reliable broadcasting channels currently available. They provide a major source of information and entertainment to households. Therefore, one of the objectives of the BO and the TO is to monitor the contents and quality of such programs targeting mainly local audience in Hong Kong. This is an appropriate and effective approach. Traditional TV and radio programs are regulated by similar local laws in developed countries around the world. As for Internet service, including online TV stations and online radio stations, collectively referred to as online stations, this is a service of disseminating information through the Internet, with its mode of operation and target clients different from those of the traditional broadcasting service. The Internet service is ubiquitous. Any information uploaded online can be disseminated to all Internet users around the globe. On the other hand, Internet users in Hong Kong may readily receive information from websites provided in any parts of the world. With the rapid advances of Internet technology, the threshold for using online media becomes increasingly lower. For example, people in many different areas of the world may disseminate information in the form of image, voice, photo, or text to Internet users all over the world via a host of online media, such as Facebook, YouTube, or even self-constructed websites at any time they like.
Dissemination of information through an online station is no different from uploading information onto the internet. The production team and viewers, listeners of an online station are no longer limited to Hong Kong people. Instead, they spread widely over the world. As a matter of fact, it is difficult to regulate overseas websites effectively by Hong Kong legislation. My consolidated reply to the two-part question is as follows. Regarding the question on whether the government should consider establishing a framework, such as by enacting legislation or introducing a licensing regime to regulate the operation of online stations as well as the content of online programs as suggested by member, as I've just explained, there are practical enforcement difficulties to regulate the dissemination of information by the public via the internet. Regulation will become difficult if the operators upload the information onto websites outside Hong Kong. In fact, programs of the so-called Hong Kong online stations may not necessarily be produced in Hong Kong. Moreover, as compared with the traditional TV or radio stations which can reach millions of people at the same time, ordinary online broadcasting via the internet is still lagging behind in terms of scale. Based on the above reasons, the government has no intention of enacting legislation to regulate online stations at this stage. As far as we understand, some overseas countries like the US, Canada and Australia do not have regulatory control over online stations or consider such stations as providing broadcasting services, which is similar to the case of Hong Kong. We'll keep in view the development in overseas countries and review our regulatory policy as and when appropriate. Although online programs are not subject to the regulation by the BO and TO currently, their contents, just like those published via online platforms or in writing, are subject to regulation by general laws of Hong Kong, including the Control of Obscene and Indecent Ordinance COIAO Cap 390. The ordinance regulates the publication of articles with obscene or indecent content, including material which is violent, depraved, or repulsive, including articles published on the internet. In view of the vast volume of ever-changing information available on the internet, the government adopts a complaint-driven and co-regulatory approach to control obscene and indecent contents on the internet. Together with the Hong Kong Internet Services Providers Association, the Office for Film, Newspaper and Article Administration has developed a code of practice. Under the COP, if the content under complaint is indecent, the webmaster will be requested to add a warning notice as required by the law or remove the indecent article. If the content under complaint is likely to be obscene, the ISP concerned will block access to the article or request the webmaster to remove it. Moreover, the office will refer cases involving obscene articles to the police for follow-up actions. Over the past 5 years, the OFNA has received a total of 15 complaints about the content of online programs. After investigation, one of the complaints was found to involve an online radio program that contained indecent language in its contents, and the website concerned has put up an appropriate warning notice in accordance with the requirements of the COP. One other complaint was found to involve an online TV program that contained obscene content, and OFNA has referred to the case to the police for follow-up actions. None of the remaining cases was found to involve content that contravened the law. In the second round of public consultation on the review of the ordinance, most of the respondents are in support of maintaining the existing co-regulatory approach with new media. Taking into account the views received, we plan to establish a liaison group comprising IT practitioners, representatives of ISPs and government representatives to enhance the existing co-regulatory framework and to update the code of practice in dealing with public complaints about the internet. We'll also step up our efforts in publicity and public education to promote the positive and healthy use of new media among youngsters. Furthermore, to achieve deterrence, we plan to increase the maximum fines in terms of imprisonment prescribed for offences under the ordinance. We briefed the LegCo panel on information technology and broadcasting on the details of the improvement measures in March 2015. Drafting of the amendment bill concerned is in progress. Thank you. Mr. Kwok Wai-keung. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. I raise this question because I received at the complaints office a complaint, and I think this complaint reflects the concerns of many parents over their children, especially minor girls or minor children, in relation to receiving indecent internet content. Now, of course, licensing regime or enacting legislation at this moment may easily be regarded as a means of suppressing free speech or legislating for Article 23 of the Basic Law. However, I believe that there should be limits. Without any regulation, the rights of audience or listeners may be undermined. And I have a question for the government. Well, in fact, the BO and TO are ineffective in monitoring internet content, as we all know, and the government's reply is very clear. You don't need a two-page answer. The simple answer is that it is difficult to regulate, impossible to regulate, and you don't know how to regulate this. So I want to ask the government, in striking a balance between safeguarding the rights to access the internet and addressing the concerns of parents over their children reading indecent content online, what can the government do? In particular, in the reply, the government has quoted some countries that do not have regulatory control over online stations. I want to know whether there are any other overseas country that do have such regulatory control. Will you conduct any analysis, and will you conduct a consultation afterwards? Secretary. Well, in fact, the regulatory approach is the global trend. In UK and New Zealand, they have a co-regulatory approach. In some of the countries, there are other mandatory measures, such as France and Australia. In terms of the ISPs, they are required to provide filter software or proxy software, or they must inform the clients of the means to get access to such filter software. In France or in Germany, they're required to ask for the age of the internet user to prevent access to indecent information. And there are, in the two countries I mentioned, well, such measures are quite controversial in terms of control over the access to information, and we will regularly review the situation and update the policy if necessary. Mr. Raymond Wong. Well, yesterday we talked about 161 at the panel meeting, and the pro-establishment camp would like to expand the scope of this provision that is in relation to Section 161. And this question aims at suppressing free speech, but fortunately, according to your answer, it's difficult to regulate effectively. And it's not that you don't want to impose any control, you just can't. But Mr. Kwok Wai-keung, who asked the question, is a young electoral member, and yet he is very rigid. And in fact, according to the ordinance, you can rely on the Control of Obscene and Indecent Articles ordinance to regulate indecent and obscene content online. And you've also drawn up a code of practice with the Hong Kong ISP Association. This is what other governments cannot do. And one solution is to have all electoral members from the pro-establishment camp, so that next time any government proposal can be passed. Mr. Raymond Wong, please ask your question. My question is very clear. Would the Secretary please tell us very clearly once again, in relation to the two questions put by Mr. Kwok Wai-keung, for the second part of the question, you mentioned that you can invoke the COIO and the Code of Practice drawn up with the Hong Kong ISP Association. Now, would you please explain clearly to Mr. Kwok Wai-keung and everybody, once again, that you cannot regulate, and you cannot regulate by enacting the legislation? Secretary, as I mentioned just now, at this stage, the government adopts a co-regulatory approach. We work with the Hong Kong ISP Association by drawing up a code of practice, and it is also a complaint-driven approach. Well, so no regulatory framework or licensing regime. Answer clearly that you are not going to do that. Anything to add, Secretary? We don't intend to do that at this stage. That's okay then. Mr. Raymond Wong, ask Education Bureau. Ask Eddie Ng. Please sit down, Mr. Raymond Wong. Mr. Albert Chen. Mr. Deputy. Recently, there is a concern over the various initiatives relating to the Internet. The police, on the one hand, made arbitrary arrests on the pretext of the dishonest use of computer, and now the FTU is taking the lead by requesting the government to regulate the Internet and to suppress free speech on the Internet. And we should call for a battle with the FTU. We should fight against oppression. Now, my question is this. The Communist Party clearly has the intention of imposing greater control over Internet in Hong Kong. And the FTU is representing the Communist Party in China to raise this request in Hong Kong. Now, Secretary, do you feel the political pressure because of the Communist Party's demand made through the FTU member to impose a stricter control over Internet? Will you bow to the pressure and take this political mission? As we explained just now, we have no intention of changing our regulatory approach, and we're currently taking a co-regulatory approach with the sector. I'm asking whether you're facing this political pressure. If not, then I commend you. Anything to add, Secretary? Please be seated. Nothing to add. Ms. Sit-ho. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. So you want to regulate against the use of foul language on the Internet. Even the G4 bodyguards of the liaison office have been heard using abusive language in this complex. Well, in fact, we already have a sword hanging over our heads. That is Section 161 of the Crimes Ordinance. I want to ask Under Secretary this. Can you explain clearly to the public that we already have this sword hanging over our head, and you should explain to the FTU member that there is no need to impose more control. Please explain whether Section 161 of the Crimes Ordinance also applies to information on the Internet or broadcasting over the Internet. Can you explain to us whether the current ordinance is adequate in handling articles of obscene or indecent content, and that you are not going to invoke Section 161 of the Internet as the Internet police? As I explained in the main reply, Internet broadcasts and articles are regulated by the relevant ordinances. What Under Secretary mentioned that answer whether it is already sufficient and that Section 161 will not be invoked. We will review our regulation on a regular basis. Mr. Charles Mock. Well, under such a non-democratic system, under the existing atmosphere, when we want free speech, we see that the pro-establishment camp would do otherwise. They would ask for stricter control, such as Section 161. We had a discussion yesterday. We wanted to protect our people from unreasonable arrest and prosecution. They, on the other hand, were asking for greater police power. And now they're asking for a licensing regime to regulate online stations as well. However, we should ask why people would resort to online stations. That's because the government was unwilling to issue TV licenses for people to properly set up another TV license, TV station. So online station serves as the bottom line of free speech. And last year, I asked I asked a similar question. Online media practitioners were prevented from conducting interviews, and even LCSD events would now turn away journalists from online news media stations, or even those registered journalists of this nature. My question is this. Are you going to set up a system that is fair and just, so that even journalists of online TV stations would be able to conduct reporting activities freely? Well, it's actually not within our purview, but I can give you this information. That was the answer given by the HAB on the 21st of January 2014. Because of the lower threshold for setting up an online station, anyone can set up an online station nowadays. There is a diversity of information. There is not a and it's a departure from the mainstream media practices. And in relation to government activities, normally the government would invite media organizations to report on these activities. And these organizations include newspapers, journals, radio stations, and TV stations. As for online media journalists, because there is not a mainstream practice or regulation on in this regard, and there is not a licensing regime for journalists or stations, it is difficult to distinguish whether the journalist is a genuine journalist. So the government does not intend to allow online media journalists to carry out reporting activities. Well, even journalists registered with the OFNA are not allowed entry. Dr. Kwok Ka-ki, Mr. Deputy. Now, free speech in Hong Kong is being stifled. Now, according to the International Journalists Association, they have asked that the national security law in relation to Hong Kong be deleted so as not to undermine free speech in Hong Kong. However, the FTU is going otherwise. They would like to limit free speech in Hong Kong. And Mr. Stanley Ng, the FTU leader, suggests that this sword hanging over the head should be struck down. And my question is this. Are they trying to limit free speech online so that we will be like the mainland with control of free speech over the internet? Well, Dr. Kwok's question is not really within the remit of the CEDB. However, the freedom of expression and free speech is protected under the Basic Law and also the Bills of Rights Ordinance. And we, as usual, adopt a relaxed environment to allow a vibrant development of the news media and for reporters to report the news accurately. However, I must stress that should there be any criminal activities involved, they will be subject to the laws of the general laws of Hong Kong, be it online or not. My question hasn't been answered. What about the national security law? How would this be dealt with? Anything to add, Under Secretary? Nothing to add.
Dr. Kwok Ka-ki. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. On the 22nd of April this year, the government published the consultation report and proposals on the methods for selecting the chief executive by universal suffrage. In addressing this council on that day, the chief secretary for administration pointed out that after the chief executive is selected by universal suffrage through one person, one vote in 2017, the ultimate aim of the selection of the CE by universal suffrage as prescribed in Article 45 of the Basic Law will have been attained. There are comments that as the pan-democratic members of the Legislative Council have repeatedly indicated that they would vote against the constitutional reform package proposed by the government for selecting CE by universal suffrage in 2017. The chance for the passage of the constitutional reform package by this council is very slim. In this connection, will the government inform this council, 1, whether the government would, after the constitutional reform package is negatived by this council, expeditiously restart the 5-step process of constitutional reform regarding the selection of CE by universal suffrage, so as to attain the ultimate aim of the selection of the CE by universal suffrage as prescribed in Article 45 of the Basic Law, if you will, of the specific timetable. 2, as some members of the public have criticized, the public consultation conducted by the Task Force on Constitutional Development, comprising the Chief Secretary for Administration, the Secretary for Justice, and the Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs, was not comprehensive, ignoring the views of some members of the public whether the government has assessed if the 3 secretaries should be held politically accountable for the constitutional reform package being negative by this council and should tender their resignations if it has of the details. And 3, given that Article 50 of the Basic Law stipulates that if LegCo refuses to pass a budget or any other important bill introduced by the government, and if consensus still cannot be reached after consultation, CE may dissolve LegCo. Whether CE would dissolve LegCo after the constitutional reform package is negatived by this council so as to restart the 5-step process of constitutional reform regarding the selection of CE by universal suffrage. Secretary for Constitution and Mainland Affairs. Mr. Deputy, the Hong Kong SAR government published on the 22nd of April 2015 the consultation report and proposals and the method for selecting the CE by universal suffrage. The proposal for selecting the CE by universal suffrage put forward by the Hong Kong SAR government are constitutional, lawful, fair and reasonable. We sincerely hope that the general public and members of LegCo will support the proposals so that 5 million eligible voters of Hong Kong could select the next CE by universal suffrage for one person, one vote in 2017 as scheduled. Our reply to the questions raised by Dr. Kwok is as follows. 1. The Hong Kong SAR government has repeatedly emphasized and also stated clearly in the consultation report and proposals, as well as in the statement made by the CS4A on the 22nd of April at the LegCo meeting, that according to the decision of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress on issues relating to the selection of the CE of the Hong Kong SAR by universal suffrage and on the method of forming the LegCo of Hong Kong's SAR in the year 2016, if the motion to amend Annex 1 to the Basic Law concerning the method for the selection of CE is not endorsed by a two-thirds majority of all the members of the LegCo, the CE in 2017 will continue to be elected by the 1,200-member election committee. Constitutional development will come to a standstill. The aim of selecting the CE by universal suffrage will fall through, and it would then be even more difficult to know when the aim of selecting all the members of LegCo by universal suffrage could be achieved. Some people suggest vetoing the proposal so as to restart the five-step process immediately. However, this is legally infeasible and impracticable in terms of legislative timetable, and hence is an unrealistic proposition. Therefore, the Hong Kong SAR government urges LegCo members and political parties to demonstrate their courage and determination at this crucial moment, act in the overall and long-term interests of Hong Kong, heed the strong aspiration of the majority of Hong Kong people, and support the constitutional development proposals, so the Hong Kong people can achieve universal suffrage as scheduled and allow constitutional development to continue to move forward. 2. Since the establishment of the Task Force on Constitutional Development, the Task Force, led by CS4A on the 17th of October 2013, the Hong Kong SAR government has conducted 2 rounds of extensive and systematic public consultation on method for selecting the CE by universal suffrage, and truthfully reflected the views of the public received during the consultation periods. All the written submissions received were uploaded in full to the Constitutional Development website for public inspection. We absolutely disagree with the unreasonable allegation made by Dr. Kwok that the public consultations conducted by the task force were not comprehensive, ignoring the views of some members of the public. At this moment, the most important task of the Hong Kong SAR government is to strive to secure endorsement of the proposals for selecting the CE by universal suffrage by a two-thirds majority of all members of LegCo, so the 5 million eligible voters can select the CE by universal suffrage in 2017 through one person, one vote. The LegCo has an important constitutional role and responsibility in the constitutional development of Hong Kong. I urge all members to act in the overall and long-term interests of Hong Kong and support the proposals put forward by the Hong Kong SAR government. 3. The concept of important bill under Article 50 of the Basic Law only applies to local legislation. Amendments to the method for selecting the CE are, by nature, amendments to the provisions of Annex 1 to the Basic Law, and hence are part of the constitutional arrangements, not amendments to local legislation. Therefore, Article 50 of the Basic Law is not applicable to the amendments to the method for selecting the CE. Dr. Kwok Ka-ki. Well, originally, I wanted to give the Secretary to tell the truth. You have cheated the public for 1 year. Last year, you mentioned that we should discuss relevant matters. And now, according to Mr. Li Fei, according to Mr. Wang Guanghao, it's not the case. You say that implementing universal suffrage through the decision of MPCSC will be valid for the long term. And Mr. Wang Guanghao said they would like to rule out the participation of anti-China people. Will prevent them from becoming a candidate, or even if one is elected, he will not be appointed by the CPG. So you have cheated us for 1 year. You have wasted public funds. If this package is reformed, it's negative. The task force and the 3 of you, Mrs. Carrie Lam, Mr. Ramsky-Yuen, and you have failed your duties. You have not reflected our views faithfully. What is your question, Dr. Kwok? It's a simple question. For the task force, the 3-member task force, and now we want political accountability, and they are not being accountable, and you are not going to consider resignations, how can you be accountable? How can you be accountable to the people of Hong Kong? How are the three of you going to be accountable to the people of Hong Kong? We are not going to accept the unreasonable accusation of Dr. Kwok. The task force has been working in accordance with the requirements in the law and to make proposals. Of course, the proposals will only be tabled in this council in 2 weeks later for scrutiny and endorsement. We have, as I've said, we have received more than 100,000 submissions in the 2 rounds of public consultation. All the submissions have been made public and uploaded to our website for public inspections, including the inspection by members here. In the past 2 years, we have organized at least 5 meetings to have face-to-face discussions with central people's government officials so as to reflect their views. And the CPG officials, apart from receiving reports from the SAR government, have also taken on board the views expressed through other channels before a decision was made. So we cannot accept the accusations made by Dr. Kwok. Dr. Kwok Ka-ki, all you have to do is to point out which part of your question has not been answered. I talk about political accountability. What kind of political responsibility are you going to shoulder? I would like to advise Dr. Kwok not to blame other people prematurely for the failure to get the package endorsed. When it comes to political accountability, as mentioned by Dr. Kwok, for the third step is the responsibility. The responsibility falls on this council. I hope the Secretary would tell us that whether we should go for the majority view. When it comes to democracy, I think by majority it should be 50%. And if it's not endorsed, it's because of small minority of members who do not endorse the package. So, Secretary, are you going to rewrite the definition of democracy to the effect that the majority or the minority or the minority shall prevail over the majority? As mentioned by the member, we are now in the third step of the 5-step process. In 2 weeks' time, this council will scrutinize the proposal. Of course, we respect the views of members, divergent views of members on the reform package, but the power rests with electoral members as regards whether it should be passed. Electoral members are representatives of the public, and of course they should have regard to public opinion in making their decision. And of course, members will have to shoulder responsibility for their decisions. Mr. Dennis Kwok. Last week, Mr. Lee of MPCSC said whether you support the reform package or the decision of MPCSC is a touchstone on whether one supports the basic law or one country, 2 systems. And we have some 40% of people in Hong Kong who oppose to the reform package. So are you saying that all these people are opposing to the one country, 2 systems and the basic law? Do you agree with Mr. Lee? In other words, Mr. Secretary, well, I'm reading from the quotation of Mr. Lee. I think he's talking about electoral members. This is the original text. He didn't talk about the position adopted by millions of people. I don't think Mr. Kwok is actually referring to the position expounded by Mr. Li Fei. My question is whether the Secretary agrees with Li Fei. As Chairman, I don't think we should allow a question that asks for public officials to comment on other people's stance. Well, it's said that we are coming to, as set out in the reply, that if this is not endorsed, the plan to introduce universal suffrage will fall through, and it will be even more difficult to know when we can have universal suffrage for electoral election. So the government is saying that if this is a veto this time, the road leading to universal suffrage for CE election will be cut, and then democratic development will be undermined. If unfortunately this reform package is vetoed. And from the 30th of June 2015 to the end of this current term of government in 2017, what would the government do in the 2 years ahead? What can you do and what can't be done? Are you just going to complain that the Pan-Democrats do not support the government in this round? We should not prematurely speculate what would happen, what the voting results might look like in 2 weeks' time. Although I would say that the chance of passage is passing the bill is slim, but I don't think we will stop. There are community organizations and think tanks having discussions on the post-reform package era. And then we can learn from the experience this time in charting the way forward and to make it a smoother exercise next time. If the reform package is vetoed, of course, we'll be very disappointed. We are going to have 4 different elections very soon. And then there are other issues that the SAR government and this council would need to handle in the future if there are issues requiring studies to be carried out by this government. I think members of this council and the CA panel can certainly raise them for follow-up. But if you say the 5-step process should be restarted to introduce another round of reform amendments, then I'm afraid in terms of the legislative timetable and the realistic political situation, this cannot be done within the current term of government. President, I'm not asking about their feelings. I was saying that political development and democratic development must continue. What would the government do in the 2-year period ahead? Well, I believe the question has been answered by the Secretary. Can we have universal suffrage for the CE election in 2017? The Secretary says the chance is slim. I'm very disappointed because the 5 million voters could have been given the opportunity to select the CE by universal suffrage, by 1 person, 1 vote. And now Dr. Kwok Ka-ki is accusing other people, saying that the Secretary has failed to tell the truth. This is very repulsive to me. And the Secretary has said openly that he would continue to contact members to win over their support. Of course, it will be mainly for winning over the support of the opposition camp, the pro-establishment members who certainly support the package. Are you really going to do this? Well, yesterday I gave notice in this council and the CS4A's office will start to invite electrical members, especially Pan Democrats. I believe it will start tomorrow to meetings so that we can exchange views on the latest development and also to see if the differences can be narrowed. The invitations have been sent out. From what I've understood, some parties have actually firmed up meeting days with us. In the coming 2 weeks, this process will go on. I've been asked by media people whether the meetings will be meaningful since the chance is very slim. And my reply was that as long as the package has not yet been vetoed, we would do whatever we can to secure the passage or the endorsement of the package. And as Mr. Yip Kok-him has said, we would like to give the power of to the 5 million people. We believe that we should do our job to the very last minute, even though the chance may be slim. Mr. Jeffrey Lam, I think Hong Kong people are very concerned about universal suffrage. As a representative of the public, we should heed public opinion. The Pan Democrats have asked questions whether you will resign if the package is not endorsed, but they have never asked whether they will resign over this. In recent weeks, some Pan Democrats were still making proposals not in line with the August 31st decision. Those are comments, those are their opinion. How can you convince them to accept the government's reform package so that millions of voters will be able to select the CE by universal suffrage in 2017? Secretary, yesterday, we had the last meeting during which the resolution that draft resolution we are going to propose was discussed. We are going to introduce the resolution in 2 weeks' time. And the contents will be more or less in line with the draft. Of course, we hope electrical members can support it. But realistically speaking, quite a few members have expressed strong reservations about the resolution. In the coming 2 weeks, we will do whatever we can to secure support. And in the past 1.5 years or so, through various surveys conducted by different organizations and where different questions have been put, we can see roughly that those in support of taking a step forward in our constitutional development so that we can have a universal suffrage in 2017, or even those who think that the package proposed by the government yesterday should be passed. They are, in percentage terms, they are more in support than in opposition. Sometimes the gap is big, sometimes smaller, although there are divergent views. But on the whole, people hope that the package can be passed in this council. It's about 50% or so in support. And if you ask whether the package should be passed by this council, there is a few more percentage points, over 50%. So that means that although the package may not be ideal, more people are in favor of passing it. This is not just about 1 or 2 opinion surveys, but the findings during a long period. As I've said, this time for this reform package, the most important thing is to cancel the election committee's power to select, to vote, and to give the vote to the 5 million voters. So it's most important that we listen to public opinion. If over 50% of our people think that we should take this step forward, then members of this council should consider that how to cast their votes in 2 weeks' time. Your vote will decide whether the 5 million voters will get power to vote. This is a historic mission. I hope members would think it through over the next 2 weeks in deciding how to respond to the public opinion. We'll spend more than 22 minutes on this question, so I think all questions would end here.
Motions. This